ADHD parent training, what does that look like? Or is it really dependent upon the child?
It really does depend on the child, but for the most part, I mean, just thinking generally, if your child is ADHD, they need structure.
Okay.
So you want to, if your family is not following, a schedule where you don't have routines in place, you want to establish those. Your child with ADHD really benefits from having a solid structure. So that would be one case of basically parent training. Is getting that structure in place. Positive training, positive parenting is another aspect of that training. So it's trying to avoid criticizing your child, yelling, nagging, and trying to find the positive, in what your child does, so that you can support their strengths.
So could you give me an example of that? Because, like, I mean, right off the bat, I see, and I'm guilty of this. I see a kid, possibly running in the street, not running in the street, but like maybe running or like, playing in the store, and it's like, hey, don't do that. You don't want, you don't want to be the bad kid or whatever. I mean, and that's a natural reaction for, people who aren't familiar, first, people who don't work with children, and people who aren't familiar with children with ADHD or ADD. So could you kind of give us an example of a positive?
So what you would do is, before you go to the store, you would go over the rules with your child. You would have rules in place. If you get through our shopping trip, you will be rewarded with this. Whether it's, we'll get to sit when we get home, we'll sit and we'll read a book together. Whether it's you get to pick something out at the store or whatever it is, you want to try to have a reward system.
Okay.
So you establish that before you go into the store. And while you're in the store, while your child is being quiet or walking with you or helping, get things and put them in the basket, you want to praise your child.
Okay.
So that's the positive parenting, is praising, and recognizing when they're doing something right, so that what you're trying to avoid is only giving your child attention when they're doing something wrong.
Okay.
And that frequently happens, especially with children with ADHD, because they are running wild. Mm-hmm. They're not paying attention. And so very often they're getting a lot of that negative feedback, that negative attention. And what you need to do as a parent is help balance that, so that they're getting some of that positive too.
So, let's say they don't make it through the shopping trip. It's like they reached a point. There's some progress, but this is our second time doing this, and it doesn't feel like it's working.
So, while you're in the store, let's say the child starts running around. Right. You might say, don't forget. Okay. Don't forget the arrangement we made. Don't forget, the reward that you get. And for some kids, it doesn't matter. They're kind of out of control, and the reward doesn't really matter to them at that point.
Right.
So you need to make a decision as a parent. Do you leave the store? Is that a consequence, or do you just push through and get done what you need to get done, and then have a consequence for your child? Once you're out of the store. It could be, however your right. discipline method works. I mean, it could be a timeout or, whatever it is.
But one of the things you pointed out is consistency. So most likely it may not work the first time, not even the second time. But if it's a consistent practice,
right.
Eventually it's going to click, it's going to stick.
Right.
So, once again, thank you for setting me straight on that. I will never judge again.